listening to Best Forevers, a podcast for kindred spirits. I'm Alysa Lucas, and if someone told me 2 years ago that I would be a podcaster, I would have laughed because I just started listening to podcasts 2 years ago. But even more, if someone told the high school or college version of me that I would be a college professor, that would have been an ROFL moment, roll on the floor, you know? That would have been laughing so hard you can't breathe, and then you're crying and you're choking, and it's just a hot mess. So, yes, I never wanted to be or thought I'd be a teacher. I think when I was in middle school, I wanted to be a fashion designer, and I had this notebook where I would draw my designs, and I'm using quotes around that. Basically, I drew the same dress over and over again, which turns out to be pretty much the dress from Pretty in Pink that she designs for prom. So fashion designer Alysa never panned out. And then I think I wanted to screenwrite, but the thing about being a screenwriter is you gotta write. So, those things didn't turn out for me. So yes, I never thought I would be a teacher, but here we are. I'm an assistant professor, and to be honest, I wouldn't change it for the world. May 8th is Teacher Appreciation Day, and I'm not here to talk about me. I want to highlight the teachers that I know, who've gotten me where I am, who inspire me every single day, and simply to give a shout out to all the teachers, mentors, coaches, and advisors because they simply don't get the due they deserve. And then I'm going to stop, and I'm snapping to what I just said. They impact us in so many ways. When we were younger, helping us find our way, continuing to support us as we move from students to humans, and to potentially friends. Because this is a friendship podcast, today I want to focus on the connections between teachers and students. Now, teachers deserve a shout out, but we wouldn't be who we are without our students. So I just got back from celebrating the end of the capstone class that I teach. This is for graduating seniors that are majors in the communication program. And the class focuses on the transition from college to the workplace and exploring different professional areas like networking and interviewing and a whole host of things so that they can be prepared to go on the job search to immediately become impact people in the workplace. So the assignments include them participating in a lot of different things that they would have learned in the program, and now it's, instead of talking the talk, it's walking the walk, right? So there was a huge change from week 1 to week 15. You know they can do it, they do it, but then you're still wowed in some way when they do it and go beyond. After the presentations, we went out for food and drinks, and as I looked around the table, I'm just amazed at the young people that I have the pleasure to be around each and every day. They graduate on Saturday, going off in many different directions to graduate school, jobs, on the daunting job search, back home, staying in Mount Pleasant to work, going on vacations, whatever the case might be. After enjoying food, we took photos, and one of the students posted a photo of the two of us on Twitter saying, "Thank you for teaching me everything I know." I had her for 5 classes over the last 3 years, and I'm so grateful to have had her in class and to know her, and even more, I'm so excited to see all the wonderful things that she's going to do. Okay. I'm trying not to get emotional about the fact that these are people that I interact with so much that I know that there is the professor-student relationship, but to say that they don't teach me something or impact me, or that I might not teach them or impact them, I think is a falsehood. And so I think it is important to look at the relationship that can be built between teachers and students. So here's what I got. Shout outs to teachers who made a difference in my life and built relationships that helped me figure out who Alysa was going to be. Letters from listeners who want to give shout outs to the teachers that impacted their life. And interviews with Cayla, who is an advisor for honor students, and she'll talk about her experience of building relationships with students and her research on the topic. And an interview with Sue and Howard, 2 friends that met as professors while at Mansfield University of Pennsylvania. I worked with Sue, and I think the friendship with our colleagues are so important, but I also like what the 2 of them have to say about connecting with students, plus their friendship, and the 2 of them are hilarious. So it's a special treat to have Sue and Howard on the show. So here we go. Here's the best forever shout out to the connections among teachers and students. When I think of my journey through the world, there are a few people who had a lot of impact on who I am today. And, I remember teachers from when I was in elementary school. Like, I loved Mrs. Sablon's second grade class. Her room was super cool, and we all had little cubbies to put our stuff in. So that's my shout out to her. But I truly started to remember the difference that teachers made in middle school. So my first shout out is to Mrs. Brovant, who taught a number of classes, but I remember her having us do book reports on famous people, and I did Amelia Earhart, and I was so nervous about doing the book report in the presentation, which is funny because I'm a communication professor now, but I dressed up as Amelia Earhart, and I don't think that was Mrs. Brovant. I actually think that was my mom. So besides, forcing a perm on me in middle school, she also made me dress up like Amelia Earhart. So on the next special episode of Alysa Got Bullied in Middle School, we'll have to talk about that in a future episode. But Mrs. Brovant, I remember her because she was always so positive, and adding to the perm and the leather jacket, khaki Amelia Earhart outfit. When I was in 6th grade, I fell roller skating and I broke my front tooth in half. And I had a dentist who saved my tooth, so thank you to my dentist. At the time, he was pretty old school, and so now I go to the dentist and I'm laying in a chair where I get massaged, and they give me a blanket so I don't get cold, and they're doing all sorts of digital scanning and stuff. So it's amazing the advances that have happened in dentistry, but that was not the case when I was 11. And so I had to get a silver tooth, and I went to school. Well, I got sent to school for at least a week, maybe 2 weeks. And of course, I got made fun of. And I remember her being someone who sort of helped me through that process. And looking back, first off, I'm just glad we didn't have cell phones or documentation of a said bullying or special hashtags to public shame me on Twitter. But I think that it was something that my personality has always been, if it's something out of my control, why is that something that would reflect badly on me? So, for example, I fell roller skating and that was a mistake. And then the dentist believed this was the way to save my tooth, and he did. So I wore it and then got a cap a couple weeks later, and I was well on my way, and I'm still fine. Chompers are good, folks. And but I just remember her telling my parents that I was the most well-adjusted child she had ever met. And in the last episode, when I talked with Gareth Reynolds from The Dollop, and I asked him, when did he know that he was funny? That it's an identity issue. And I think Mrs. Brovant, and the way that she spoke with me and the things that she told me about myself and the things that she told my parents really sort of set me up saying, what can I do to stay well-adjusted? Or that is a way to enact that. And so I thank her for that. In high school, as a freshman or first-year student, I was in a journalism class, and then I became a member of the newspaper, and I was on the newspaper staff for 4 years. And that was my favorite class in high school, and my favorite teacher in high school was Mrs. Mitchell, who was the advisor of the Zodiac. And I wanted to be a journalist, and I am not. I'm a teacher, so... So that's not on Mrs. Mitchell. I think that is on the Oklahoma City bombing, which when that happened, I did not particularly enjoy the coverage from the media, and that turned me off from going into journalism. But I did continue with broadcasting and so on and so forth. But Mrs. Mitchell was someone who really helped hone a lot of different skills, not just in curiosity or how to do journalism well, but also just things about life, because I felt like we had so many conversations that was just, this is how to be a person. This is how to adult. Let me explain something to you. And I think the cherry on top for me was that she was absolutely hilarious, and that is really something that I connect with. When I went to college, I started off at Lansing Community College, and I took a public speaking interpersonal class with Scott Miller. And Scott Miller was a graduate student at Mott College, and so he would commute over to teach this class. And he is the person that made me want to go into communication. And a few years later, I transferred to Michigan State. And Scott Miller, I talk about him in my teaching philosophy. Every teacher has a teaching philosophy, and mine is written out. And I talk about him quite a bit because he didn't just come in and say, oh, here's communication or here's how you do a speech. He just breathed so much life into everything we were doing. He brought everything to the forefront, and it was always surprising. You never knew what was going to happen. It was like Big Brother, expect the unexpected. And I just remember on the first day I was sitting there and this guy sits down next to me and he was like, what do you know about the class? And what do you know about the teacher? And I talked to him a little bit about it. And then when class time started, that guy sitting next to me ran up in front of the class and he was like, hi, I'm Scott Miller. I'm the teacher of the class. And I was like, oh, no, you did not do that to me. And I was just like, what? And just from there, he always did things like that. So to teach us nonverbal communication, which deals with a lot of different things like the use of time or emotion expression, or there's a whole host of things. We can go into nonverbal in a different episode. But he showed up late to class, which was unusual. And then when he got there, he was not his usual self, right? He wasn't talking to us. He basically was get into pairs and work on this thing, and he looked really upset. And I thought, oh gosh, I wonder if something happened. Maybe he was in a car accident on the way here. Maybe someone had passed away. And after about 10 minutes, he was like, so what do you think? And we were like, what? And this is how we started learning about the use of time and the other expressions that we do through nonverbal communication, how we communicate. And I know some people might be like, well, he sounds tricky. To me, that was not just doing the same old thing, that there is a way to reach people, that you can be creative. And I don't necessarily think for myself that I saw teachers as creative, which is a glaring error. But it was, Scott Miller who really showed that to me. And I definitely give shout outs to Scott in class all the time. I might not say his name, but when I glitter bombed myself in Dark Side to talk about revenge, that was my head nod to Scott Miller. When I got to Michigan State, I had a teacher. Her name is Dr. Kelly Morrison, and I had her for interpersonal and gender communication. And then later, she was my graduate advisor for my thesis, and I was her TA. And so I was able to work with her really closely. And much like Scott, she, to me, is someone who just breathes so much life into teaching, showing her creativity and using her personality and storytelling abilities to really connect with students, to show how important the topic is. And I never thought I would teach gender communication, but I do. And I'm so glad because she taught me everything I know. There's lots of things that teach you about gender every single day, but her style of teaching, things to be concerned about, how you communicate in that class, and why saying you guys is probably not going to work in gender. And just knowing that even today, after having her 16 years ago, that I still know the stories about her best Western best friend. And I know about the stories that she told us about her husband and her relationships and her work experience, because those related and they connected. And it wasn't just to tell us stories, it was to show us the concepts she's teaching, what they were and how we could connect to them. And so I incorporate that into my teaching style. And I think that continued with how she advised me through my thesis and sort of the experience that I have, that I learned a lot about how to be a better writer, how to be an advisor myself, and just simply how to be a better woman. Kelly has had a huge impact on my life, and I still see her at conferences, and it's always a joy to catch up with her. But a lot of my memories from being at Michigan State are because of her, and the teacher that I am today, and the writer that I am still working on every single day is because of her. I then went to Penn State for my PhD, and I was encouraged by Dr. Judy Burgoon to do so. And Judy Burgoon is one of the most prolific researchers in the communication field, and she focuses on nonverbal communication and deception. And she came into one of my classes as an undergrad, and she came in to talk about a research opportunity she had. And the undergrad in me was like, paid? Excuse me, I'm like Jimmy John's when I'm watching football on the weekends. So I applied for it, I got the position, and then my world changed, if you will. I went to a training session, and there was about 30 people in the room, and she talked about all the people she was working with for these grants for the Department of Defense and Department of Homeland Security, and the work that I would be working on as an undergrad and then later as a master's student. And one of the things I was struck by was that she worked with so many people. There were at least 30 of us at Michigan State. There were people at military bases, other universities across the campus. And about 2 months later, I saw her in the hallway, and I was like, should I say hi to her? I don't know if she'll remember who I am. Or here's the thing. Thanks, Dad. She was probably going to call me Alysa, like, hey, Alysa, how's it going? But no, she walked right up to me. Hi, Alysa. How are you doing? How are your classes going? And I was floored. I could not believe this person who was responsible for such a huge project and was working with so many people remembered an undergraduate who was working for her in a minimal way. And she not only remembered who I was, but she also knew how to say my name. And I still tell the story. Students are like, okay, we got it. She knew your name. But there is this level of she made me feel like I was important. And I worked with her in research. I never had her as a teacher, but that has informed a lot of who I am and how to connect with other people, that they are other people. They might be students, they might be professors, they might be staff, they might be community members. It doesn't matter. They're still people. And so knowing people's names, knowing how to say them correctly, knowing something about them, that connection is really important. I had two advisors at Penn State, Dr. Waleed Afifi and Dr. John Nussbaum. And this is an unusual experience. Most people have the same advisor during their PhD program. And I was lucky enough to have two. So Waleed was someone who started out my research program with me. I wanted to study jealousy, and he was like, who cares? And I'm like, I do, but it was this idea that how are you going to help people? And that has always stuck with me. How can we help people through the things that we do? And he was like, I'm going on vacation. When I come back in a week, you let me know what research you're going to do and why it's important. And I was like, okay, buddy. And so I did. And that's when I developed this idea of how friends talk about sex, which I talked about with Tara in the episode, The Chick to Her Duck, where you can learn more about our research. And I had him in my formative PhD year, so really this idea of, here, pull this chair around and sit next to me. I'm going to show you how to do the statistics. I'm going to show you how to do this thing. And I think that was very helpful at the time in my program in the sense that he knew that's what I needed at the time. Then he left for a different university, and Dr. John Nussbaum took over. And I had John at a time where it was like, here's the deep end of the pool. Time to learn to swim, lady. And it's the idea is like, you now know the stuff. Now you got to do the stuff. And I think that from John, I learned to be an independent scholar. And now I have to give a little head nod back to him. I'm teaching 401 where it's the same thing. Like, you know this information. I had Waleed and I had all these other amazing professors at Penn State and Michigan State and throughout my life at Lansing Community College and so on and so forth. Now I have to actually do it. And the support that I had from him was different. I would go in and sit down and talk about the issues I was having. I would tell him about how I cried in the library for a week because I couldn't figure out how to deal with my missing data. And he's like, this is what you need to do. And he's always kind and funny, and we talk about sports, but it was beyond that advisor relationship. And I would say with all these people, there was something a little bit more. Now, as a teacher, now that I became a teacher, and it was Dr. Dennis Gowron at Penn State who really helped me develop that. And I remember him saying that I was conscientious to a fault. And at the time, I was like, no, probably not. And I think what he meant was that I put too much in and that one day I would burn out. And I was like, no. And then I did because that is the personality I have. And so I think he helped me recognize what my strengths were, what my weaknesses are, or the things that I need to be aware of. But he really helped develop me into the teacher that I was at Mansfield University of Pennsylvania. And there I had amazing colleagues in Sue and Bia and Holly and Lee and so many more. And I think that's really where I came into my own with the students. Bia and I would carpool, so we called those our little think tanks. And so being able to talk about stuff, they have meant a huge difference. And then now that I'm at Central, my colleague Adam Barragato, who he's now at Purdue, but the ability for us to work together on presentations and workshops about being teachers, and that we have the same level of energy and probably anxiety, so we get along so well. But I think we each made each other want to be a better teacher. And so these are the people I'm grateful. I know, thank you for listening to me talk about them. And I know you're all thinking of, the person who made the difference for you. And these are my people. This is my posse that I think of who Alysa is today. A lot of these people played a huge role, and I want to thank them. I know many of them are retired or still working and looking to retirement or still doing their thing and grinding every day and making an impact. And so I want to say thank you to all of them for their ability to connect with students, their care for students, their creativity, their innovation, just going in and not doing the same thing, that really just making a difference. All right, so now I have some listener stories. A couple of people wrote in about their experience with some teachers, so I would like to read a couple of those. So this letter is from Caitlin. It says, "Hiya, Lisa." Okay, I added the tone. "When I was in high school, I had this teacher named Mr. Doc. He's this goofy, fun-loving, dad-like teacher that almost every girl had a crush on." Well, we got to appreciate the teachers for their red chili peppers on Rate My Professor, too. She also says, "I also had a crush on him, but that isn't important. I never really interacted with him much until about my late sophomore year in high school. I was always quiet, kept to myself, and didn't really get out much. To cut to the chase, I had planned on committing suicide, oh my God, in the summer of 2010, because my anxiety and depression was out of my control due to my blossoming alcoholism, childhood traumas, but this isn't about me anyway." Oh, Caitlin, I'm so glad that you're writing the story, and it sounds like Mr. Doc is going to be pretty amazing. "One night, my friend had called me because there was some meeting going on after school and there would be free dessert. Being heavily motivated by sweets, aren't we all? I had agreed to go. To my absolute teenage horror, it was for a non-denominational youth group called Young Life that was led by, you guessed it, Mr. Doc. My friends and I had already taken huge plates of free cake and decided it would be rude to just leave without hearing all that he had to say. Cue the awkward ice-breaking games and introductions. The meeting ended and he was handing out pamphlets for this camp he was taking the Young Life group to. We brushed it off, said thanks, and started to leave. Once we got into the car, I remembered saying, the camp actually looks pretty fun. So against my then atheist point of view, my friends and I signed up for camp and started seeing more and more of Mr. Doc outside of school. I could go on and on about how fun camp was, but I'll keep it short. It was the first time in years I had fun sober, surrounded by my friends, and this goofy adult who we've grown close to. He introduced me to my faith now and gifted us with books relating to the matter. Something had changed in me, and it was all from the kindness of this teacher who probably would have brushed it off if we had just come to his meeting for the desserts. I never told him that I wanted to end everything that summer, but as you can see, I'm still alive. Caitlin, I love you. I haven't told anyone, but it's all because of the guidance and love from this teacher who had just met me. High school went by and our friendship grew, and I'm still friends with Mr. Doc today. Soon I'll be working alongside of him at the Young Life retreats and giving back the love he had given me 8 years ago. I don't know if he'll ever know how grateful I am that he never gave up on me. Anyway, I hope this wasn't too sappy, but as soon as I saw teacher stories, I knew I had to tell people about Mr. Doc, the absolute best teacher and friend I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. Thank you, Caitlin, and thank you, Mr. Doc, for being you. And Caitlin, I'm so glad to have read this letter. This is amazing. The next story is from Amber. I have a story to share about a teacher that greatly influenced multiple facets of my life. I first had Mrs. Helbig, and she's like, yeah, pronounced exactly as such, Mrs. Helbig, for my first art class in high school during the year 2000. She was such a presence that I made it a point to sign up for every one of her classes that I was qualified for during my time in high school. From the first time I laid eyes on this woman, I had immense respect and gratitude for her. She was a tall, thin, soft-spoken woman with straight hair and a beautiful smile. She very much resembled Diane Keaton. Oh my goodness, that reminds me, Judy Burgoon reminded me of Sigourney Weaver. Okay. She immediately infiltrated our student minds with technique and beauty, both in the artistic sense and the humane sense. She was like a soft, ethereal breeze in the form of a human. I fell in love with her within 5 minutes. There is not a word in existence to describe the admiration I had and still have for that woman. Mrs. Helbig could grab a pencil, a paintbrush, or any other medium and effortlessly wow us with demonstration. Furthermore, her words were just as poetic as her physical art was. She taught us how to be empathetic, inspiring, and kind. The morning of 9/11, I was in Mrs. Helbig's classroom. We all huddled around a tiny radio and shared our communal confusion as the terrible events transpired audibly before us. I am eternally grateful that I was in her presence during that moment. I don't remember her words, but they were, of course, immensely comforting. I remember an instance where a classmate of ours had died in a car accident, and a close friend of hers had been denied by the principal and counselors an opportunity to attend her funeral during school hours. Yikes. Mrs. Helbig turned a blind eye as he slipped quietly out the door on the day of her service. Go, Mrs. Helbig. I got into a bit of trouble during my senior year for skipping school and ended up graduating from an alternative high school. During that time, I ironically skipped school to go back and see Mrs. Helbig. Amber, will you ever learn? She seemed genuinely happy to see me, and we talked for about 20 minutes. The last thing she said to me as she placed her hands upon my shoulders was, quote, promise me that you will make a living doing something related to art, unquote. I promised, and I kept that promise. I'm now 33 years old. I have not seen her for 15 years, yet her lessons still resonate with me, and I suspect they always will. Amber, what a lovely note, and I hope you're not skipping school anymore. I mean, I know you're not in school, but stop skipping. This is amazing, though. Mrs. Helbig, good for you. Okay, I said I wouldn't talk about me, but here's a letter from one of my students, Mary. I first met Dr. Lucas when I was trying to take classes over the summer so I could graduate faster. She was new to Central and teaching Communication 101, which is our public speaking class. I instantly loved her energy and enthusiasm for what she taught, and I enjoyed going to class. I appreciated her organization and attention to detail to help her students remember information. Her feedback was always phrased as a way that you understood her criticism, but never felt bummed out about it. And that's also why I don't use red pens, because even when you write nice things and people say red, they're like, ugh! I always thought it was my opportunity to change and better succeed. All of this led me to asking Dr. Lucas to be my advisor for my communication minor. I've been extremely let down by my advisor for my major and desperately needed someone who could guide me. I'm not a traditional student, and Dr. Lucas understood that, never judged me for it, and always let me rant when I needed to during her office hours. I could email her with any concerns, and she would address it with me right away. She gave me confidence when I had concerns about other communication classes and made sure that I was going down the right path for me. My time at Central was filled with numerous very large life challenges. Having 2 kids and being pregnant twice while at Central made my life difficult, and I truly feel that without Dr. Lucas's support and guidance, I wouldn't have loved my minor as much as I did, and I wouldn't have been as successful either. I wish every student at Central could take classes with Dr. Lucas and realize the gift that she truly is to Central Michigan University, because I will always treasure her. Mary, well, first off, hashtag you do you. Right? That's what I'm about as a teacher, is that I'm never going to judge you. I'm here to help. I care. My door is literally always open, except when it's closed. And thank you for the kind words. But I'm so glad to know you, Mary. And Mary has graduated, and we continue to be in contact. And I appreciate her engagement with the podcast. I appreciate her, and I appreciate all of her posts with her beautiful children, because they are, some people just say it, all babies, all kids are cute. No, they're not. Her kids are cute. Thank you, Mary. That was really nice, and I appreciate the kind words. All right, the last letter I have is from Taylor. My high school years were hellacious. Ugh, that doesn't sound good. I had a lot of health problems. At one point was hospitalized and missed exams, and even my counselor forgot to mention I wasn't just skipping class to my teachers. Oh my goodness. I went to school in a very small country town. I had just over 100 kids in my graduating class, and we were considered one of the larger grades. This also meant we didn't have many staff members. From freshman to a senior, I was fortunate to have one special woman as a teacher each year. She was young and not very far into her career yet. She taught me everything from English to global issues and even sci-fi. And then Taylor says, still so weird that they even offer that class. Sounds amazing. What made this woman so important to me was the fact that she was an outspoken feminist in a town full of hicks with rebel flags on their shirts and trucks. At the time, we were in the midst of the George W. era of U.S. history, so Republicans were feeling like winners. She was not afraid to tell students right from wrong. She went by her maiden name and even used Miss, even though she was married. Her passion for girls and women's education and empowerment was so obvious as soon as you stepped foot in her classroom. There were many students that challenged her and acted out in class, but I never saw her be disrespectful or denounce their opinions. Throughout the hallway, she was always, quote, crazy feminist, or, quote, she's a lesbian. These were commonly said even though her husband was on staff as well. Oh my God. Those people didn't realize that all those insults they were slinging her way daily were something that she probably loved because she knew being gay or a feminist were hardly things to be ashamed of. Snaps. I'm sure she faced criticisms from coworkers as well, but that also never showed throughout my time with her. She set an example for me that no matter where you're from, you can be your own person. You can go against the flow and stand up for what you believe in. You can still have differing opinions and remain professional and respectful. Her classes were always something I looked forward to and made me genuinely want to attend school. As soon as I graduated, I added her on Facebook, and she's still someone I talk to. I'm attaching a recent conversation we had because it shows you how much I truly love this person. For context, I had tagged some friends thanking them for being there for me in the status, and she popped up in the comments. Anyway, I hope this is what you were looking for. This teacher literally changed my life and helped me during a really dark time. She might not ever completely understand how much she impacted me, but I appreciate her greatly. And so, as Taylor mentioned, she just said, like, thanking them for being there in the time. And then the teacher said, and maybe outwardly feminist high school teachers, ? Smiley face. And then Taylor says, for sure, you know, those security questions where it asks who was your favorite teacher? I always put you in there. Haha, don't be hacking my bank account or anything, though. Winky face. And then the teacher said, oh my God, best comment ever. And then Taylor says, I really do that. You're one of the very few people who made me want to go to school. I've told you that before, but I appreciate everything you did for that small hick town. And the teacher said, I love this so much because I know what it's like to have that one person who makes it easier to go to school. I had that teacher too. If I was even sort of that person for anyone, win. Oh, I love this. I love the comment the teacher made. We all have that teacher, right? And even if there's one person for someone else, I feel that if I am that person for one person, that is amazing. And I just love this idea is that we all do have these people. And so I want to know who your people are. I will post a survey on bestforeverspod.com/surveys. And it's not a survey so much as it is just a space. I use SurveyMonkey so that it's organized and I can print it out and that sort of thing. But you can tell me about your teacher and your connections, and I can do a future episode, because here's the thing. We don't need to appreciate teachers one day a year. We can do it a lot more than that. Or you can also email me at bestforeverspod@gmail.com. So thank you, listeners, for sending in your stories. That's so amazing. And now what I would like to do is share an interview that I did when I was at my National Academic Conference in November. This is from Dallas. So as a reminder, the two interviews that you're going to hear might have some background noise, or I might be off mic a little bit because I was doing the best that I could. And I was also a newbie podcaster, so I have all sorts of plans for the conference I'm going to in Prague. So don't you worry. Based on these letters, I think that this leads into the first interview that I wanted to share with Cayla. Cayla is an advisor to honor students, and she's also a PhD student in New York, and she'll talk a little bit more about herself in the interview. But what I really enjoyed about meeting Cayla was, A, I think we might be kindred spirits, but B, this idea of her being that person, sort of like Taylor's teacher was talking about, that she developed a friendship with a student and she presented research on the topic at the conference. So I asked her about her experience, the benefits of the relationship, some of the problems that she's come across, and we just have a conversation about treating students like people. So here is Cayla. All right, can you tell me a little bit about who you are and what you study?
Yeah, I'm Cayla Lanier. I'm a graduate student at University of South Florida studying communication. I also work full-time as the Director of Academic Advising for the Honors College at USF.
That's really cool. I've worked with honor students at all the schools I've been at, and they're great.
Yeah, I've been there 10 years. It's been a really rewarding and wonderful work experience, and working with such high-achieving students motivated me to go back to school to get my PhD. So I've been doing that for 2 years now.
I think that's so amazing that a lot of times we think about as teachers or as advisors the impact that we have, but students have an impact on us too, and that's really cool.
Absolutely, and that's pretty much what started the research study that I'm presenting about here at NCA this weekend. So about 4 years ago, I met a student. He came into the academic advising office, and it was just like, hey, what's happening? What can I help you with? And he sort of fell apart with typical first week drop-ad drama. And that relationship developed over the course of 4 years into a really meaningful friendship that we continue to today. But going through the process of becoming vulnerable with a student so that I could relate as like human to human really taught me a lot about the importance of just being a person to the students that I work with, because they can relate to me a lot more with whatever it is that they're going through, and then my advice oftentimes feels more genuine and authentic, and it just really hits them more personally.
I can tell you, though, as someone who has a similar philosophy, it warms my heart to hear your connections with students. And so before talking about your research, I thought maybe I could ask a couple questions about your advising relationships, if that's okay. This is off the cuff. This is podcasting, right? You hear something and then let's ask about it. So with this particular student, it was a friendship that grew out of advising. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. And so what do you do to develop those types of relationships with students?
So I am a pretty genuine, authentic person. I am who I am. I really don't put on airs to try to be someone that I'm not. So whether that means admitting what a crappy day that I'm having to the students who are also having crappy days, whether it's like setting up for an event. We had an event where we had popcorn. Yeah. And so the students started throwing the popcorn and trying to catch it in their mouths. So I joined them. Yeah. And of course they're like, oh my God, Miss Lanier, you're the best person ever. Because I was just silly and goofy and a real human being, which students don't often think of their advisors and their faculty and their professors as real people, but we are.
It reminds me of Mean Girls when they talk about, I saw her outside of class. It's like a dog walking on their hind legs.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's even better when it's at college tailgates and they're like, oh my gosh, there's an adult here. Quick, hide the beer.
Yeah. You're like, I am also drinking the beer. Well, and you might not know this because we just met, but I would say everything you said so far, we might be kindred spirits. Like, this might be the start of something beautiful. Isn't that the line at, like, a beautiful friendship in Casablanca? Because I use the hashtag, you do you, and because that's what I do. And one of my core values is authenticity, and I'm just real, and I think that connects with the students. Like, the students are going to be more on board with you and so on. So.
Absolutely, especially with the honor students that I work with, where they hold themselves to such a high level of expectations for themselves, and they're high achievers and high performers, so they do a lot, and they do a lot of things at once, and they do it all really well. Yeah. So I think it's helpful for them to see someone who is just being authentic and being true to themselves, because then when I tell them, you've got to be true to who you are and follow your own life's path, then it means something to them.
Yeah, I talk about in class, I'm like, I have anxiety. So I talk about those things because I know there's students who have anxiety. And I try to do the same things to show that we are all humans trying to make it through this world, and everyone's path is different. And so it's just, what path do you want or need to be on? And how do you do that? And how can I help you? Right. So why don't you tell me a little bit about your research? I'm so excited to hear about it. So please tell me a little bit about the project that you're presenting at the conference.
Yeah, so as I was saying, I met this student through my job as an advisor, and we kind of clicked immediately in the advising office. And so he started coming back to my office about once a week, just dropping in, following up on whatever he had shared last week, asking questions. And I think he was looking for a mentor. He was looking for someone to guide him. So his approach was, if he wanted to find out something or if he was dealing with something, he would ask me questions about myself. So he would say things like, what's the most impactful book that you've ever read? Or what's the one book that you think every college student should read? What do you think are the important factors to consider when picking a major? And so rather than saying, like, what do you think I should be thinking about? It was, what's your opinion on these matters? So with that approach, it led me to talk about myself, so then I was becoming a bit vulnerable with, well, when I was in college, this is my experience, and here's what I was dealing with, and here's how I came to these decisions. And so one of the themes that I talk about in my research is William Rawlins' idea of an academic friendship. So he says that friendship is sort of the leveler of the power relation so that you can kind of come together person to person rather than like this teacher and student role, so that you both open up yourselves to learn from each other as well as understand each other better to deepen the learning outcomes. So I think Chris's approach really pushed down my sort of professional boundary walls so that I became more real in answering his questions and opened the door for what really became more of a mentorship, where he was asking me questions beyond just what classes to take and how to prepare for a career and really getting into the stuff of life, So like, what's important in a friendship? Is there something that a friend could do that would end the friendship? When do you think a relationship is going into unhealthy territory, So our conversation started sort of venturing outside of just the pure academics and getting into the stuff of life. So after about that first semester, he ended up becoming a student worker in our office, and he was working every morning, Monday through Friday, for like 3 hours. So we started having coffee together every morning. Like, he would get there and I'll turn all the lights on, and then I'd get in, we get our coffee and kind of sit in the lobby and chat. And so the other framework that I use is Taylor and Altman and Taylor's social penetration theory, which basically, if you've seen Shrek, it's like ogres are onions, and it's this idea that like we are sort of onions with layers, and so as we peel off these outer layers of like general non-personal information, the more like we get into that inner core of that personal deeper information as the relationship deepens, as that happens. And so one of the ways that happens is what they say is through breadth and depth of interaction. So like the more you see someone and the more you see them in different like facets or different types of interactions, and then the deeper information you share, that's what leads to that peeling back of the layers of the onion. So the fact that he was there in the office every day and we were seeing each other every day meant that we were seeing each other more frequently, but then also I became his advisor and his supervisor because then he was working in the office. So those are the two sort of like theoretical frameworks, which is just fancy ways of saying what other people have already said and applying it to my life, that have set up my understanding of the relationship. So my paper uses those as a foundation and then digs into some specific stories of things that happened both in the semester that I was conducting the research and in the years previous, where I kind of was able to pull out these were the key factors that changed things for us.
And so one of the things is that there might be critiques of these kinds of relationships. And I'm wondering if you have had any sort of backlash that, no, these sorts of relationships should be very black and white, or that there shouldn't be personal. And if you've had, how you sort of tackled those sort of critiques.
Yeah. So my advisor, as I was working through this process, she just asked me, Cayla, what bothers you about this? Which is such a brilliant question because it really gets at the heart of why this matters to you. And so what you just asked about is exactly what was bothering me, that the interactions that I was having with my student felt authentic and genuine and real, and I felt that I was being real to myself and who I was. And so I felt like I was not pushing against any boundaries that I was uncomfortable with, yet what I was doing and the relationship that I was creating or being a part of was not the norm in my workplace. And so while I never experienced explicit questions or rumors or any sort of like wanderings of any sort of impropriety, because I was very aware that I'm a female, he's a male, and that is something that I have to be aware of.
Yeah.
So I never had any direct issue with that, but it was always something that was kind of at the back of my mind of making sure that my door was open when we were meeting, and if we were going to go for a walk on campus, that it was out in public spaces, and just being aware of the way that my actions could be seen by others and understood by other students as either the norm or an exception to the norm, so that they could understand the expectations for their way of being with their advisors.
And would you say that you have approached other academic relationships with students in a similar way? Have you had similar types of relationships with other students?
Not nearly as close and deep as this one. So I always will host students like at Thanksgiving who can't travel home to see their families. So we'll have like international students, for example, who can't fly home to El Salvador, but also have never experienced a Thanksgiving in America. And so I always open my doors to whomever wants to come join us for a meal on a day. And I also have led study abroad programs where I spend a week with students in host family homes, which means like sharing a bedroom with another female student, eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and working alongside them. So I've developed close relationships with students, but this was the first time that I really let my guard down, so to speak, to be able to be real enough where I kind of set aside the professional advisor role and really came into it with like a friend perspective.
Because I would say that I've gotten some of like, well, you're just friends with your students, and like that's a negative thing. And I would say maybe I wouldn't label them as a friend as I would with, you just met my friend Tara before we did the interview, as I would to Tara, who were similar in age, similar experiences, and bonded through graduate school and that sort of thing. But I think that there is a level of connection and authenticity that helps students, and if other people call it that, I'm okay with it, because I think that there is a lot of great things that can come from having relationships with students. And I know that there are many students who might come through our doors, both of us, right? And we might make an impact and we might never hear from them again. But then there's other people who I think we'll all be in contact with forever.
Yeah.
And so I have students who come back, alums, and, are always like, are you going to be here? Are you going to be there? I've gone to breakfast, they come to my office. And so the thing about it is, I would say there are some students I have deeper connections with, and it might be because I've had them in 6 classes. They were on my research team. But I also know that they know that I'm not going to treat them differently in the work that they submit. But they also, I think other students know that I'm always open to making connections and helping people because I care about student success and their life and being a person and a human being, right?
Yeah. So that's something that has been part of my thinking. It hasn't really come out in my research quite yet. But so currently my job is academic advisor, which is different than professor.
Yes.
So unlike a professor, I don't have control over their grades, for example.
Yep.
So I don't have to, it's not quite the same level of like abuse of power, you know what I mean? Yeah. Conflict of interest.
Yes.
But on the other hand, while you may have a student for a semester or 2 semesters, I have them for 4 years.
Yes.
And so there's never okay, finish up the semester and then we can grow the relationship further. For me, it's like, okay, when you graduate, then we can be adults together. Yeah. And so, but I'm interested in, there seems to be a bit of a different sort of level of expectations for faculty-student and relationships and interactions, and advisor and student interactions and relationships.
Yeah, I would think with like advising, especially, that there is this level of, here's the path I'm going on in life, and so that there might be more like life advice and things that happen, or what can I do when I'm done, so career and with the major or minors and being sure they graduate, or how to get involved on campus and all sorts of things that they might be going through. And I might be, as a professor, limited by that, and you might have this experience too. You only know what students share with you, and I have an open door policy. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. If my door is open, you can come in, and it's open to students that I have no idea who they are. And in fact, I've been interacting with a student who never got a chance to take a class with me, and she was like, that's the one thing I wish I could have done when I was at Central and I'm graduating. I'm like, come see me. Let's have a chit chat. Let's have a conversation, what you're going to do, what you're about, and that sort of thing. And I open it up to everyone. So anyone can come see me. Anyone can come talk to me because, again, it's about, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if I didn't care about students. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So then I would say, like, what have been, I mean, I think that there's clear benefits for the students. I have students who, they're like, can we come talk to you about what we're going to do with our life? And then we go get like coffee or something like at the student union. And it's called a latte laughs, like a lot of, like a latte, but it's a lot of laughs. So people have labeled what it's called. But so there's benefits, this idea of like getting advice or helping through a difficult time. A lot of students experience anxiety and depression, and I'm very clear about my experiences, so they might be more likely to come to me. So I think there can be benefits, like I can help students the best I can. What do you think have been the benefits for you having these academic friendships or relationships?
So this one happened at a really unique time when I was going back to school. 2 years ago, I took my first doctoral class, non-degree seeking, while I was still figuring out, like, if this was what I wanted to do with my life, which was humbling in a way that I haven't been humbled in a while. I've been in my job for 10 years. I'm kind of like, I know what I'm doing. Yeah. So being a student again gave me a need for peers. And the peers who were accessible to me were my undergraduate honor students. Yeah. And so one of the ways that Chris and I connected was with sharing papers back and forth. So he wanted to share his papers with me because like he was proud of them and he wanted to show them off. But then I was sharing my papers with him because like I haven't written papers in a really long time. And it's really helpful to get feedback. And especially where I was in that moment, I had not yet connected with peers in my grad program. And I was still very much intimidated and trying to put on that show of like, I'm a competent grad student, I'm on your level, when secretly I have no clue what I'm doing. And so I don't know if it was that he felt like a safer sort of like peer, but eventually it's just that I really enjoy his company. I really enjoy the conversations that we have, whether they're about his life or about my life or about current events and politics and different ways of reading the world. And knowing him and talking with him has challenged me to think differently and see the world differently. He's taught me about new music and band and books and, things that I think friends do, which is to support and encourage each other, but then also to like share their lives with one another and encourage each other to become better versions of themselves and to see the world in different and new ways. And so that's what I've gained out of the friendship, but it's also really challenged me to, obviously it's opened up this whole new research area that I'm really interested in.
I'm really interested too. I think it's amazing. I'm like, I'm so excited to talk to her.
And so I've grown a lot by knowing him and have just really enjoyed his company, which is at the heart of what a lot of friendships are. It's, while it could be various common things that you have in common or things that you don't have in common or shared experiences, it's about the fact that you just really kind of enjoy hanging out with this person.
It's fun, it's positive.
So that's really what it's all about at the heart of it.
Now, you mentioned earlier that he asked you, like, what book you think, what did he say, all first-year students should read? And then you said you learned some books and music from him. Do you remember what book you said to him to read?
I don't. It's been 4 years and it's bad memory. So I don't remember what I told him that I thought he should read. He is a big Ayn Rand fan, and so he gave me one of her books. But it's been really interesting that has been a continuity throughout our relationship. So for Christmas, we give each other books. And when he graduated last May, I had just read this book called Walking to Listen, which it's about this kid who just graduated college and was studying sort of like coming of age. And so he decided to study coming of age by walking across the country and like what you're doing, asking people to talk about their experiences. And so I'd read it, and I thought that it was Chris in the book. It could have been him, and I was like, he needs this. So I gave him that book for graduation.
That sounds amazing.
And he flew through it and read it again, and then passed it on to someone else. So I know that it was impactful.
That is so awesome. My last question for you is this. If there were students coming in who needed help or wanted to maybe walk in the door like Chris did, do you have any advice about the best way for them to do that? Or what should they do if they're looking for someone that would help them in the way that you helped Chris, or how Chris helped you, or the relationship that you had? Is there anything that they could do specifically or communicate to let an advisor know that they need some help?
Yeah, I think that there's two things, and it goes back to the research.
Yes.
It goes back to Altman and Taylor, but it's this idea of breadth and depth, so the student has to be willing to dig deep. And they have to be willing to either ask deep questions or give deep answers. And so when an advisor says, like, how are you doing? Not pulling the like, oh, I'm fine, but really being able to say, like, well, I'm really struggling, and what do you suggest? Or I'm having a hard time with this, or I'm really enjoying this and I want more. What do you know? Mm-hmm. But also to be reciprocal in that. And so being willing to ask your advisors what advice they have for you. So not just letting one person kind of be the controlling, here's what we're going to be talking about, but taking an active approach and saying, like, here's what I would like to gain from you. Mm-hmm. And then it's breadth. So it's being around. It's hanging around. It's coming around a lot. It's talking about whatever's on your mind, whether it be an exam or whether it be the football game or whether it be a book that you read or a movie that you saw or this issue that you're having with a friend or a roommate or a parent or whatever. It's being willing to, like as Rollin says, level that sort of boundary wall and just be real people together.
Yes, let's be real people. I love that. And so I think that one of the things that you might see with students now is that maybe afraid to come to office hours or afraid to have those conversations, maybe more willing to do emailing or, that sort of thing. And so it's like really getting out there and being out there. And then when you do go talk, getting deep.
Yeah, and I think that we play a role in that too, so I run a peer mentoring program. In the spring semester, I teach a class training them to become peer leaders for a fall class that they run with freshmen. And on the first week of class, we watched Brene Brown's Vulnerability TED Talk and talking about, like, being vulnerable and being okay with being vulnerable. And so I tell them the sweaty pit story, which is the very first time that I ever taught a class. I bought this whole brand new outfit. I had the pencil skirt and the power heels, and I had this beautiful slate blue button-down shirt. Nice. So I went walking across campus in South Florida in August, where it's nearly 99 degrees. And I walked into the classroom, and I was doing so great, and I presented the syllabus, and I just felt so good about it, like I did it. And then I went to the restroom after class, and I had sweat marks, like all over the shirt. And I was so mortified. I was like, I'm going to be the sweaty pits lady. Like, for the rest of these students' lives, they're going to remember their first day of class was with sweaty pits lady. And so I tell this story to my students, which cracks them up. Like, they think it's hysterical that I'm talking about my body, first of all. Like, I have a body, but my sweaty pits. But I share that to say, like, I'm human, and so are you, and you're going to screw up. And then one day, 10, 20 years down the line, you're going to laugh about it, and it's going to be part of this thing. So I think that we as instructors and teachers and advisors have to be willing to share our sweaty pit story and, like, prove our humanity, because then they don't just send the formal, like, Dear Dr. Lucas email. It becomes the, like, hey, so I'm having a hard time. We're coming by the office, and what are you doing today? And so it's got to be both ways.
I have so many things in my office. Students just come in and they're looking around, and I have so many things because they're conversation pieces, so they can come in and see all my Funko Pop Walking Dead figures that I have, or my Snow White painting from a former student, or any of these sort of things. I have a sign that says, ask me about my cats, so I have all these ways. And so it's like, come on in. I'm a person. I have cats. I like The Walking Dead. We probably have something in common. Pick something in the office to talk about, or just come in and be you. But I love this area of research. I love this idea of bringing the boundaries down and being real people together. And I'm so glad that you're doing that work, and that I bet you make such a difference in students' lives by having that sort of point of view and philosophy. So thank you so much for being you, right? Sweaty pits and all. But thank you for sharing and for talking to us about it. I love it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed this.
Thank you. I'm so glad there are advisors like Cayla in the world. She speaks to me because not only is she finding a way in which to help these students, but helping those students is through connections. And through those connections, there is organically going to be a relationship. There is going to be a connection, and that connection matters. And I absolutely love the book exchange. And I think we should start a teacher-student book exchange. Like maybe we can get a thread going, maybe we can get a list going and it can be shared. But if you're a teacher, what book do you think students should read? Students, what books do you think would help teachers understand you better? And I have done this. I have asked students, what are you reading? Tell me about it. Send me the books you're reading. And then I read those books. And I have Claire, one of my students, on, and we do the book club series, right? So I think there is something about entering into people's worlds when you understand the things that they like, the things that they read, or the things that they watch, or the things they listen to, music, podcasts. So maybe it doesn't just have to be books. Tell me what music or movies or podcasts, what would you recommend if you're a student to a teacher or a teacher to a student? The last interview is the friendship among Sue and Howard. And I know both of these wonderfully funny people. Sue was my colleague at Mansfield, and I am still connected with her and Howard today. I did not have the chance to work with Howard, but I know him well, and he is quite the character, as you will see. I know that Sue and Howard have impacted my life. I have worked closely with Sue, and they both asked me to participate in their oral communication book. So I've done some writing in the book, and they were celebrating the new edition coming out at this conference. And so I'll post pictures and things like that. But here's what you need to know about Sue and Howard. Sue has been teaching for 32 years. She has been recognized as an outstanding mentor to female students by Student Submission. She has been selected by Outstanding Seniors for the Faculty Mentoring Award for 9 years. And in 2007, she won her very first teaching award for the best of the best in gifts at NCA. So this is the conference we were at, and gifts is the division that focuses on teaching activities. Sue also just won the Dean's Award for Outstanding Teaching. I mean, literally, this just happened last week, and I was like, perfect timing, but congratulations to Sue. It is a very well-deserved award. Howard is retired but taught for 39 years, including 2 exchanges to Russia. Howard, whose focus is in broadcasting, just had a control room named after him at Montclair State University. His claim to fame is placing hundreds, if not thousands, of people in the TV business in Manhattan and other places. He has students at every major network and at VP level status. I mean, this is amazing. And then both of them together have a few textbooks that they write together. So this interview, as part of this appreciation, is the impact that Sue and Howard have had on students. And I also think that comes from them being friends, working together. And I like their friendship origin story. I like what they have to say about connecting with students. And they also provide advice for students on how you can connect with teachers. So buckle in, this is a good one. And also get ready to laugh. Here is Sue and Howard and I at NCA. So I worked with Sue at Mansfield University of Pennsylvania. Go Mounties.
Right. Yoo-hoo.
Woohoo. And I met Howard through Sue, and they have known each other for a long time, and I feel like this is going to be an interesting origin story. So can you tell us a little bit about how y'all met?
Well, in 1999, I got a job at Mansfield, and you had been working there for...
already 11
like
years.
11 years.
11 years. I started there in 88.
And I had an office next door, and we spoke to each other a couple of times, and we both hated each other with a passion.
That really is true.
It is true.
What did you hate about each other?
Go ahead, Howard. Say it.
I think it's culturally, we made different assumptions. I have very direct communication. Mm-hmm. Sue is much more moderate and very professional in the way she talks, and I just let people have it. You know, whether they're faculty or students, I just tell it like it is. And she also had come from Arkansas, and when you work in the North, you have that cultural attitude that people from the South are white-gloved and cotillion and all that
And
kind of
that's
stuff.
how he classified me. It pissed me off because I grew up in the North, so I was direct too. But because I had been there for 5 years, I was very subdued, very professional, no swearing, no any of that stuff. Yes. So, I'm listening to him swearing in his office and playing favorites with students and taking them out for drinks.
Yes,
and
I
was
I
like,
called
you
it
can't do that.
Yeah, she was always, you can't do that. And I said, you watch me.
And now
I
I'm
always-
exactly the same.
Somehow I've won her over to the human side of teaching.
Oh, you
for-
stop. You're so full of crap.
Well, I always have
No,
been.
actually, I think where it started to change was he would go for drinks almost every day with a male colleague at about 3
True.
o'clock. And I would be sitting in my office. Yeah, oh yeah.
The
Every
last
day.
couple of years at that school, I needed alcohol. So,
And I would look longingly as they would walk past my office every day, feeling very left out. And I can still remember the day when they were walking by and he looked in and he said, "Hey, do you want to come with us?" I said, "Sure." And then we started going, and that's where it started, I think, where we learned about each other and started to appreciate each other.
my last 2 years. Well, the other one was a bullying thing, actually. I don't know if you remember it or not.
I do.
But we had a senior faculty member who was known for trying to use his voice, and I'll use the gender so you know, against people to try to get them to comply or to do stuff. And our offices were right next to each other, and I heard this going on, and this person
He was yelling at me one day.
walking away and yelling for
and he
the
was
wrong way.
Screaming at me, and when he left, I shut my door. And of course, I was at that point where I was crying in my office, quietly, and he started knocking on the door. Howard did. And he's like, "Open the door." I said, he's like, "Open this door." And I opened the door and he came in and he's like, "Don't you dare let him get to you." Blah, 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 blah. And I mean, that really was a bonding moment as well,
Absolutely.
I think, for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that was really a key because, I mean, I was already at that school tenured full professor. So this guy had done this once to me, even though I was hired in with tenure, in the department. And I knew the technique, having worked at other schools.
Right.
And, mentally you're thinking, you're not getting away with that shit with me. I have tenure. And I know one hell of a lot more than you do about media. And I said, "Are you done? Get out." And I had done that years before. I heard this going on with Sue, and she was a new faculty member, and I said, "That's bullshit." He's not, as soon as I saw him walk away, I knocked on the door and went and I said, "Don't you dare let that voice do that to you." I said, "He's totally wrong."
Right.
And what he said. And I think that changed the
I
dynamic.
was validated. It did change the whole dynamic.
It did change the dynamic.
And I don't remember if it was after that you invited me to go to the bar with you and your colleague, or if it was before. I think it was after that.
I
Probably
think so.
that makes more sense. And then we started talking about communication and the books. Yeah. And we were
us more about that.
Yeah, we were down at Marx Brothers, which all Mansfield alums will remember.
And students.
And it was I don't know even what got us talking about it, but we were talking about the fact that books were so expensive and it would be neat to write one. And I said, "Yeah, but there's so many on the market." And Howard started talking about, "Yeah, but we could get alums to write professional perspectives and that would make it different." And that was pretty much what launched us on the way of trying that project. I don't remember a whole lot more about the origin of our first book together other than that, but it was a great bonding experience as well.
Oh, absolutely. And also to write a book for students that are freshmen or sophomores in a style that they can understand, not the
Right.
traditional academic style.
Wah,
where-
wah, wah,
where,
wah, wah, wah.
with big language and big adjectives and adverbs and
Ontology and epistemology are not in our oral combo.
right, no. And every other sentence or so, they have some kind of a footnote, where you've got to go to the bibliography. I said, that's bullshit. That's a graduate level written textbook. And when you've got kids coming from high school, they need people that speak their language if they're going to be interested in anything at all. And so it was a combination of things. And then when I
Sure.
retired, we really got serious about putting a book together.
Oh, and it was fun because I think we write differently than most people do. Because
Oh, yeah.
anybody I've talked to who's written a textbook with somebody else or done writing with somebody else does their own thing, sends it to the other person does their own thing. Howard and I very much like to play with others. So we would sit at the computer together, and I always had to have control because I'm the control person in the relationship.
That isn't really true. She types better than I do, and she knows new media better than I do. But in these
I
days,
would
it
be
was just a
typing,
computer.
And then you would be yelling, no, say it this way. No, let's do this. And we would work together, with, scotch and...
Well, scotch and other stuff. But the biggest thing is
Other drinks. Let's
I've never
clarify.
lost. Yeah.
Other drinks.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Beverages, I used to call them. But the biggest thing is I haven't lost my ear for how kids listen
Right.
from high school.
Right.
And I'm an inner city kid from Detroit, Michigan. And so I look at textbooks, like when I went to school, I said, my God, these things are written at the graduate level, for a freshman. And granted, you pick up the game, but for the majority of young people, they can't make that jump. When I think of how many kids never, ever went to college from my high school, I said, I've got to write for those people because they need to be better at communication if they're going to have work long term. And so that's the way I think it all evolved. And we
Right.
do yell about language occasionally in the book.
You can always tell that at the end of paragraphs where there's two words, it's always Howard. Move forward.
Well,
Because he always has these two-word things that go at the end. And then we had the big fight over Harbinger.
yes.
I said, we're not putting that word in the book. Yes, we are.
They can learn one new word with each edition.
But and the one thing I'm going to share with Alysa is that you have to look at where we were in our lives at the point where we met each other, because we have a 25-year age difference between us. So Howard was ready for retirement. I had just had my third child. And so in the 2001, when we became friends, in a lot of ways, Howard saved my life and relationship because I was bogged down big time with 3 small children, a very supportive husband who was extremely supportive of our friendship, which was great. But my husband's an engineer. And so he doesn't chat, he doesn't laugh, he doesn't do the kinds of things that I get from Howard. And I think it really funny, we had a contractor who was working for us one time, and he said, hey, what's the deal with you and Howard? And I said, what do you mean, what's the deal? He's like, no, what's the deal with you and Howard? And I said, oh, well, Howard likes to shop and I like to shop, so we go shopping together. And Howard likes nice meals out, and so do I. My husband doesn't like any of that stuff. So, we go out to dinner a lot together, and we, do things, we explore things, we travel. And my husband was very happy to take care of the children while we were doing that. I know that's highly unusual. But anyway, the contractor looks at me and goes, damn, my wife needs a Howard.
When she really should have told the contractor, no, you need a life. He said, maybe your wife would appreciate it if you laughed and talked a little more and did things with her rather than ignoring her. But the biggest thing is, I think the other thing that we have in common is that we're both calm people.
We both laugh a lot.
And we're both student-oriented. When
And we
you
have
like what you do.
sophomoric senses of humor,
Oh,
which a
yes.
lot of people don't appreciate.
Yeah, I'm still in high school in Detroit.
We
I'm
are
afraid,
too.
a lot of the time.
We both are.
But at least I'm not carrying, a knife anymore like I had to do in high school to survive. Oh, yeah, we had switchblades when I was in high school. But,
Oh my God.
But that was
The other
old
thing about this
days.
friendship is you learn that you never know what to trust that's coming out of his mouth, whether it's the truth or a story.
No, that's true. Switchblades were common in the 50s in inner city Detroit.
I love the distinction, truth or story.
Or a story. Absolutely.
Well, you learn to tell stories because our lives are stories, and so is communication.
And you tell lots of inappropriate ones all
Oh,
the
yes,
time, even in front of my children.
Absolutely. Well,
the
someone
time
has to tell them.
No, you remember when my oldest was 5, and he said something. We were on a trip together with the kids, and Howard said something, and I said, oh my gosh. I said, honey, do you know that he's just making that stuff up? And she says, oh yeah, Mom, I know. And I said, well, how do you know? She said, because you're always saying, oh, Howard. So even at 5, she could pick that up.
So, but her kids are very smart. I've got news for you. Not everybody would pick that up because they don't listen anymore. And listening is such a major portion of friendship or any kind of a relationship or even between a teacher and a student.
Right.
But I think the more we work together on books, and even when I was retired, Sue is very student-oriented, and she takes great pride.
Well, and so
in,
are you.
Yeah.
Totally.
So
and always have been.
In terms of student orientation or being oriented towards students, this is a podcast about friendship and kindred spirits. Do you see connections between professors and students? How would you describe that relationship?
Critical. It's a critical relationship. Our approaches would be different. Do you want to go
But
first?
no, I was trying to clarify. Do you mean in terms of whether they're a friendship or a kindred spirit,
How would you describe the relationship with students? Would you describe that any students that you've had as having like a stronger connection or seeing them as like a kindred spirit?
Sure. I think we would both say the same thing, is that we have good relationships with all students.
Mm-hmm.
There are some who make an effort to try and connect with you more than others. And there are some who stay in your lives a long time later, but you never know who it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Because the ones who were very close to you when they were in school sometimes disappear off the face of the earth. I exercised every day with a couple of students one year. And we talked probably an hour every day on the treadmill.
Yeah.
And I've never heard from them again after they graduated, not once.
Wow.
And yet there are others who write back, and you have very deep relationships with some of your alums. You can talk
Absolutely.
about that.
Absolutely. The relationships that I've always had with students, first of all, at most schools, except for one, Montclair State, I handpick which kids I think have the talent to make it in some aspect of the business, which is something I think not a lot of teachers do.
Yeah.
And you give those kids everything you've got in terms of every subject. I used to do it, obviously, over a glass of scotch at the local bar when they were old enough, but even that's not true. I used to teach broadcast history at my first school in the South in a bar in the basement over pitchers of beer.
He was one of those. I
was
kid you
one of
not.
those.
He would go at Mansfield and get kids out of class,
Out of
telling
class.
the professor that he needed to speak with them, and then he'd take them downtown for a drink.
My code word was always
crazy.
coffee.
Let's go for coffee.
And very important. People
Talk
look
a
at
little
it,
bit
but I
about your
don't.
friendship. You have some very deep, deep friendships
Oh,
with a
absolutely.
couple of alums, and how did that happen?
Through teaching, and there's some of them, thing that Sue said a little while ago, that you don't even know. Like a year ago, I reached out to a kid from my Cincinnati period because I wanted some help in LA, and that kid wrote me an email. This is somebody I hadn't heard from in like 40 years, and they wrote me the nicest email you could ever want from a student of what the class meant to them and how they got a job when they first moved to LA. And I never knew I had connected that well with this person, but obviously I had just never spoken out. Sue even read that email.
Yeah.
But I treat kids like, as I just said, my own kids.
Right.
That's the way I look at them, and I approach them. They've always called me by my first name, never a title, because I think that's bogus. And we've always been on a first name basis because I treat them as pre-professional people. I don't treat them as students.
Yeah.
And I say some pretty tough stuff to some of these people. But I'm doing it so that it forces them to think as what they've got to become if they're going to, be in the business. And actually, I got surprised this last October, a huge group of professional people from a former school did a big surprise for me, which was wonderful.
They named a room after him at Montclair State University. They raised all the money to do that.
That's
so,
awesome. Yeah.
and I got to watch him interact with them. And the one thing he's not talking about that he should is that.
Uh-oh.
Not that I'm in control of this or anything.
But it's the first time she's seen why I talk about that school and those kids.
But you give an element of love, too, to your students because you didn't have children.
Right.
And I think you look at some of them as kids. I mean, he calls them kids. They were all in their 50s and 60s, and he's still saying, these are my kids. And they're like, kids? What? I'm 60 years old. I don't care. You'll always be my kids.
I don't care if you have had sex and have children. You're still my kid. I'm one of those.
Yes, that's him. But they show a family picture. He's like, oh, I see you've had sex.
And those,
which again is why I love hanging out with him because he always has me laughing.
But and they laugh too. I mean, it's just the way they were brought up and trained. But it was a unique program, and we were together at that school for 4 full years because we started them in the program as first semester freshmen, and it was a teamwork program. So we are like family. And even I think Rob was with us from Mansfield. He said, I have never seen a group of students react and be this way at an alum reunion. He said, never. And this kid's gone to Boston U, and he's been around the schools in New York as guest lecturer and everything. He said, I've never seen this with students before. And I said, that's why I talk about that program. It's not that way anymore at that school, but we created the program together, and we were all fighting for recognition as a group. And that's why it is the way it is. And I hugged, I think, every single person that was there that I could get my hands on. And these other traditional faculty types were kind of looking us with their mouths open.
They had no idea what was going on. Like you could just tell that there was no connection there now. And I think ours is the same way at Mansfield. And you know that because the students still love you. And there's, oh, I know, don't cry, Alysa. It's a podcast. She's crying. Oh my gosh.
Do you need a tissue, Alysa?
But we create something there that I don't think you have at a lot of schools. I could be wrong. I mean, I've only taught at a few places, but there's something unique about the way that we treat. And I don't know how it falls into friendship theory, exactly, but there's a warmth element that we give. We're doing the things that we're doing for your good. I think you and I and Bea and Holly, we all reinforce that over and over again, that we're not putting you through the ringer because I get some kind of thrill out of it. Mwah, ha, ha, ha. I want to grade 52,000 things. Mwah. No, I'm doing this because I know it's what will make you better. And Howard's continued to stay involved in our program, even after retirement, in coaching students and helping them get opportunities.
And I think that you're right, like maybe the relationship is different. It's not like a true friendship or a true kindred spirit, but the idea of connection is absolutely necessary for the success. Like you were talking about, what's the success rate for your...
Oh, probably. It's definitely over 90%, probably closer to 95.
And what is that?
Employed in field. Yeah, after they graduate with us.
But they're still so connected to the school and to all of you. And so then they're more likely to give back to the school and be connector points for other students coming out of Mansfield.
Absolutely.
It creates an environment that people want to be a part of, and they want to stay a part of. And so it might not be friendship, but it's definitely, there's a strong connection.
Exactly.
It's like a great definition of camaraderie.
Yeah, exactly.
Where you're all equal. There's not a power play on the part of anybody, because we all know how we can put the other one down. Let's put it that way. And with students, I always used to tell them, I said, stop worrying about the grade. Get on with your life. I want you to fail here because I do not want you to fail in the real world. Because I said, no one will forgive you. But I said, next project will be better. This is how you learn.
Right.
And I'm not going to hold failure against you on one assignment. I said, get over yourself.
Exactly. And I say the same thing. I mean, we're very
similar as teachers.
As different as we were as teachers when we first met. Being back in the North gave me the ability to let my dark side come back out again. It had been squelched down for 5 years, until I earned tenure, and then I said, I've got to get out of here and come back. I mean, I love the South, don't get me wrong, but I didn't want to raise my kids there, so.
Well, and you have family in the area, too.
Right.
So coming home, and then it's interesting, it's like you come home and then you create a home for students at Mansfield, and that I would definitely say that's the case. I see the hashtag all the time, MU for life, that people
love MU. Yep, absolutely.
So a couple of questions to
Sure.
sort of bring it together. What advice would you give students coming into college in terms of making connections with their professors?
They have to stop by.
Office hours.
They're, stop by office hours, and not just to plop down and chill. Come in with a question. I think one of the best ways to get to know your teachers is to ask them questions about them. And you know that from teaching conversational skills. People love to talk about themselves. This podcast has been the most fun thing I've done in forever. It's all about us. But, so stop by my office and ask me a question about something that I know about or whatever, and I'd be thrilled to talk to you. Yeah. It's when, a lot of times I don't see students until their junior or senior year. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And if you're a quiet person who just sits in class and does nothing, I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want to do. I can't help you. Yeah. I can only help you if you're going to reach out and have a relationship with me. And I have to say, I think I'm not very selective in terms of, I cannot think of students that I dislike. Yeah. I just can't. Certainly you enjoy some more than others, but if somebody's trying to make a relationship and they're asking you some good questions that isn't just BS, or that they're trying to schmooze or whatever, but they're asking you things and you're starting to develop a relationship. And then I can say, okay, what is it you want to do? Yeah. Okay, how are we going to get you there? Oh, you know what? Here's this opportunity for you. Mm-hmm. And so I think students definitely need to make connections with their professors because it's not I can't reach out to every student in a program. Yeah. I'll focus on the ones who are reaching out to me. And this generation of students coming into college is so used to texting. Yeah. They're not used to conversation. They don't know how to have a good conversation with somebody. And that's why I do that exercise in business and professional, where we go downtown and we have a conversation and they get graded on it. Yeah. And some are terrible. Some I could stab my eye out after 5 minutes, and others I'm like, at the end of the hour, I don't want to go home. Yeah. So get in there, have questions, have conversations. Right.
And also do your work.
Yeah. Well.
In class. Yes. In class. It's a combination of all of those things. They've got to get involved in their major as soon as they can, do quality work the entire time. Go in if you've got a problem. Why did I get a bad grade on this assignment? And accept the rough language for what was wrong with it. And then volunteer, redo the project. Yeah. Don't ask for an upgrade in grade, just redo it. Yeah. That says more than I'll redo it if you'll give me a better grade. Yeah. Just say, I want to learn. Yeah. And keep that attitude and keep volunteering for organizations on campus that reinforce the skills you need for employment. We look at the track record. If you've got a kid coming in as a freshman and then all of a sudden they want an internship or a letter of recommendation when they're a senior, you can write a better letter if they have consistently talked to you and done their work and come to class for 3.5 straight years. You can give them an honest recommendation.
Right.
Okay, same question for both of you. Sue, what's your favorite thing about being friends with Howard? Howard, what's your favorite thing about being friends with Sue?
The laughter.
I would say
I grabbed it first.
Ditto.
No, you have to come up with something else now. Go ahead.
I would say the laughter, and I know I'm supposed to say something different.
Yeah, say something nice about me, Howard.
But Sue is innovative in her teaching. She'll bring in new things every single semester. She's reading, she's up to date. She'll take those risks in class of bringing in new stuff that's never been done before. That is what a teacher is. You get tired
She's asking you about why I'm your friend.
But you are my but you are my friend because We go, like I'm here in Dallas at this conference.
Only because he's my friend. Otherwise, he would have never gotten on a plane or come.
I really am at that stage in life. I don't like being on planes anymore. But I'm here because of Sue. And well, then we found out we're going to be able to meet you, and so of course I'm going. And catching up with all of this stuff. But if it wasn't for Sue, I would never be here at this conference or anywhere. She just does funky, original stuff, and I like that.
So it does connect. You're an innovative teacher, but you're also exploring, and you get them to Texas.
That's right, because otherwise, I mean, how many birds can you feed or bears can you watch in retirement?
Yes, I have a chalkboard by the kitchen. How many bears have walked by this window this year? And I'm still waiting for the wild turkeys to return. They are so much fun.
Retirement sounds exciting.
It is.
It is exciting when you're
when you can take an hour to drive for a cup of coffee. He goes up to New York, to Corning for a cup of coffee, turns around and comes home.
Yeah.
That's his life.
Absolutely.
Of course he loves me.
I'm having fun.
But I have to say, too, I can't stress strongly enough how honored I am to have this position in his life, because you could be friends with any number of people who love spending time with you. And for whatever reason, you've let me be there in that position. And, honestly, it's what keeps me going most of the time.
But it's so much fun. She laughs at all my tacky jokes. And she corrects me if I don't hyphenate the swearing properly related to grammar.
And I make sure his coat is buttoned or unbuttoned correctly.
And button correct me. We have fun. Mm-hmm. And
there's nobody else I have a relationship like this with. I mean, if you ask me how many friends do I have, real friends? Yeah. 2. Yeah. That's it in my life.
But this is such a fun friendship to be a part of.
No,
it's really cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
this is a
Alysa.
blast.
It is a blast.
It is so fun.
And welcome to communication. It's a great career, and it's a great major. Yeah. We cover all the bases, and I think we're the most important academic program on any campus.
So this podcast is recruiting minors and majors at all universities, too. So
yay!
Absolutely.
Come to the dark side.
Come to the dark side. We have fun.
And we have cookies, apparently.
Oh, yes.
And we tell the truth, even more important.
Yes. Sue and Howard are hilarious. I'm so glad they're friends. I'm so glad they have each other. But I'm also so glad that I get to witness and have been witness to their friendship. I have also been witness to Sue's teaching, to her mentoring, to her undeniable love for students and her unwavering support for students, and just this grind and hustle she does every day to make her students better and work for them and work with them. And it's absolutely amazing. And again, I was not at Mansfield when Howard was a professor there, but he still participates in the university, helping the students improve in their business and professional class. They actually do Skype interviews with him. And so it's just this amazing, even when you're retired, you still have the love for students. And as you could hear, his kids, right? The impact, not just that he has had, I mean, the amount of students that he has been able to place in jobs is astounding, right? The amount of people that they've both been able to reach through their books or through the classroom, they are people who have an impact on students. And I would say that there are students that have had an impact on them because those are the ones they stay in contact with, as they talked about. So I just thank you to everyone who participated in this episode. I think this is an important relationship, and much like friendship, we don't talk about it. And maybe it's not friendship like you would call your best friend. They're not on the top tier, as we've talked about in previous episodes, but there is something about human-to-human interaction, that connection that can grow organically into other relationships, that romantic relationships grow into friendships, or friendships grow into romantic relationships. I call my parents my friends. My brothers are my friends. There are different parts of life when those roles are going to be more important. Then when I lived at home, they were my jerk brothers teasing me and stealing where one person sits. You have to listen to episode 3, Siblingships, to learn about me and my brothers fighting over where we could sit at the dinner table. But I think that we're in a different part of life, right? And so my brothers mean different things to me. And that my teachers came to me at exactly the time that I needed them in my life, or as an advisor, or reminding me that I'm important, that I have some skill, or here's what you could do better, or I am here for you. I realize that you're struggling and I can help you. I still email John Nussbaum. I still message Walida Fifi and be like, help, right? I still interact with Bia and Sue, and it's just one of those things that the different people who impact you, it doesn't go away. You might not have that relationship with them that you had before, but you still remember them fondly. And I really like this idea that Cayla talked about, bringing up again, the top dog of friendship research is William Rawlins. And Bill Rawlins is someone, if you are into friendship, that is whose books academically you could read. And they're not like, academic. No, they're easy to read and they're important. And his research has been critical to understanding friendships. And I like this idea of an academic friendship. And that later, like Taylor, the listener, said, as soon as I graduated from high school, I added my teacher as a friend on Facebook. You want to stay connected. I was hugging my students after their final and saying, stay in touch with me. Let me know when you get that job. Let me know if you need anything. Let me know what successes you have so I can say that I knew you when. These are things that'll matter in life in terms of our well-being, for networking, whatever the case is. And so I don't think we should shy away from these connections. I don't think we should scoff at these connections. I think we need to know more about them and how we can maybe improve those connections so that students could be more successful, that students could feel like they are a part of something, so that teachers know what they're doing matters. It makes a difference for people. And I think that we could also sort of plot out what sort of successes people had based on the teachers who took interest in them, or the students who took interest in teachers and how they made that connection happen, and then sort of how that built into a further friendship and then into a job, a career, a lifestyle, an identity, whatever the case might be. So in this May, at the end of the year, for those of you who teach K through 12, those of you who are ending your semester in higher education, thank you for everything that you do. The grading, the prepping, the office hours, the emailing, the listening, literally everything. Thank you for what you do. And for students who are graduating or they are completing another year and they're thinking about the things they want to do and going off and doing internships or celebrating and vacationing and whatever the case might be, thank you. But not only that, congratulations, because you are another step further in who you want to be and what you want to do. If you like what you have in your ear holes, then please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts. Or you can email me at bestforeverspod@gmail.com to provide feedback or to share stories that can be shared on the podcast. Also, as a reminder, there are a series of surveys on bestforeverspod/surveys where you can share your stories about a wide range of things for future episodes of the podcast. You can follow Best Forever's Pod at Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And as a reminder, I'm also currently on Spotify and iHeartRadio. So if you are fans of those outlets, you can find Best Forevers there too. So, get me in your ear holes. I now have what we might call an entire library of episodes that you can catch up on or re-listen to, and I appreciate it all. If you would like to support the movement to love on our friendship more and this podcast, Best Forevers, you might consider supporting the podcast on patreon.com/bestforeverspod. There are various different levels of donations and perks that go along with them. And one of the things that would be related here to this particular episode is I have one goal that when I reach, I will obtain a wood bench. I will get a wood burning pen. Everyone who donated to it, their names and friends' names will be etched into that bench. And then I'm going to donate it to a school as a buddy bench, because connections are important. And maybe that buddy bench will include friends, or maybe that buddy bench will include a teacher and a student, or an advisor and a student. And just the idea that those benches can encourage connection and conversation. I do have one new patron this week. So thank you, Robin, my new purple shirt buddy. Ferguson is so excited to have you on his intern team. And we appreciate your support of the podcast so much. It just means that I need to keep on keeping on the podcast. I love the support. It is motivating and inspiring to know that there are people who like to join me on this movement. So thank you so much for donating and being part of Best Forevers. It means the world. So I think if this episode has done anything, it has told us that there are specific connections that we need to foster and nurture between students and teachers. Because without our friends, who would we be? But honestly, without our teachers, who would we be? And certainly without our students, who would we be?